in this country we had wealth tax and estate duty. Until about 1987 or so, I have paid wealth tax. When my father passed away, we had to pay estate duty. What we decided was, by 1977, the whole capital base, which was built up, as I said, from 1850 onward, was destroyed. There was nothing left. Houses were taken over, estates were taken over. And to build up the capital base, the first issue that President Jayawardena did was he took on these big construction projects. Mahavali allowed many of the Sri Lankans to come back into as businessmen with capital, whether it was subcontractors or subcontractors to subcontractors, whether it supplied goods. But the total of Mahavali and the Kotte capital project was to give back capital. Secondly, we felt that we could accelerate it with the war going on if we suspended inheritance tax and estate duty for some time. Well, it got suspended, but it was never introduced again. And now, as the IMF says, a capital formation has come into being now. It's very, very big. We have a big capital formation here. We have others outside Sri Lanka. So when you are looking at progressive taxation, they said you could bring this back. If you want to know what high-level taxes are, how about paying ordinary people paying 60% of the tax? And then if we had anything left over, more than 2,500, which was a lot in those days. Minister's salary was about 1,000 rupees. We had 2,500 left. Anything more than 2,500, it was put into basically compulsory savings. I used to work for Mr. Ambalawana, and we had a thriving practice telling people how to avoid paying this to the ceiling on taxes. So we've come a long way, and I think with all the issues, our taxes are certainly more progressive than it was earlier.
Would you be still consulting, sir?
Well, looking at the gentleman here, if you are willing to pay on the side, I'll have to do it. What else? I have paid very little as president. This is the only way to add to my remuneration.
The Honorable Era and Mrs. Honorable Mrs. Mann.
Just on this imposition of wealth tax, I don't know why the imposition has been postponed. I'm asking this question because while we are told that there will be wealth tax and it will come someday, the poor have been forced to pay taxes in various forms because this is an indication of the disparity. See, everybody knows that we have to pay more taxes. There's no question about that. But in taxation, there has to be a very strict yardstick on fairness. So that fairness index is still not achieved, I think, and that's an area to look at. Last budget cycle, when the budget debates were going on, Honorable Iran Vikramaratne, myself and a few others, publicly proposed a different tax structure that doesn't impact on the poor. Now we did a public demonstration of how that can be achieved and so on. Doesn't seem to have been taken on board. Now I'm saying that also because I agree with the President that all of us have to do this together, and the discussion must happen here, not on the streets. But if the discussion is not to happen on the streets, then it must happen here. It must, already in this forum, Harsha had a half a minute say, and now I'm put my hand up and I'm saying something, right? So if this is a forum where the government just explains and goes away, then it's not a robust discussion at all, and it won't achieve that particular objective that we discuss openly, transparently, and go together. I also agree with the President that the ethnic issue, as he mentioned, must be resolved. And you can't say we'll do it after the economic crisis is over. No, it won't happen in that way. It's intrinsically connected. As we speak, we have a massive public protest going on in Batiklo. We have another massive public protest going on in Mana, and even bigger protest happening in Vaunia. How many of us even know that it is happening? So, the archaeology department is running amok. Right? And I just looked at the logo of the archaeology department. It's a Dagaba and the Dharma Chakra. So is that the only archaeology relevant to this country? So the fairness question and the public support, particularly to pull us out of a difficult economic situation, you must have the support of everybody, and that's not just only economical support. It's a perception and an understanding that everybody is being treated equally and fairly. And that is severely lacking, and we are willing to participate in these discussions. If we know there are suggestions and our views will be taken on board. And all of those would be constructive suggestions, I can assure you.
In fact,
And I, okay.
yes,
Far as I am concerned, I have said Sri Lanka's economic question has two E's. Both have to be resolved. Our first priority was getting the IMF agreement. But in the meantime, there were parallel discussions with the representatives of the Tamil from the north and the east. And we have come to agreements now which we will start working on just after Sinhala New Year holidays are over to implement it. I know the one in Vaunia is about the destruction of the temple. That's one which we've asked the police to investigate. And secondly, archaeology, we had one meeting in Vaunia, we had one meeting here, but there are still problems with archaeology, and there are other problems with forest department, which applies both to the north and to the north central province and Monaragala. So we will be looking at those issues next week. In addition, now we want to start on system B. A part of it would be for the companies that are looking for land to export food to Singapore and as well as Middle East. The rest will go to the people of Eastern Province, and that will be fairly substantial. Then there are the other issues which we will be resolving in time to come.
thank you, Mr. President. Honorable Mr. Sumandiran, in fact, that was going to be a question of mine as to the reaction of the North and East in your view to the tax proposals and the level of cooperation that can be expected from it. But you've already addressed a bulk of that on the concept of the perception of fairness being a key player in the acceptance of proposals of this nature. Is there anything further you wish to comment on before I hand over to the Honorable Eran Wickramaratne for his observation?
Just one matter, as the President said, we're having discussions together, and I only hope that we move forward in that without postponing those reforms as well. We've also had discussions with regard to how the North and East can contribute towards the economic growth, because there is a high level of potential there. So we've looked at special development funds, different kinds of investments coming in, all of that. And we will cooperate with the government with regard to realizing all of that, because, as was mentioned by you and others at the beginning of this discussion, IMF bailout package and thereafter the borrowings will only make us more into debt, take us more into debt. For growth to happen, there has to be a plan that sort of pulls us out of this, of this mess. And for that, investments are key. And there is great potential if we target certain areas and have and address those issues. That's one. The other is the corruption susceptibilities was one of those concerns that IMF mentioned. Now the president mentioned regaining Sri Lanka effort, but during that time there were two privatized ventures that were reversed: Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation and Lanka Marine Services Limited. I was counsel for Mr. Vasudeva Nanayakara in both those cases. Because there were those two cases, those were reversed. How many more went unaddressed? Sri Lanka Insurance Corporation, the asset was valued at 6 billion when it was in fact more than 125 billion. So you start on this process. I agree with the president, the state can't do business, but you start divesting, the huge opening for corruption.
I'm coming into the SOE question.
Can I tell you on that? Firstly, for North, we are coming up with a big development plan for North, and North will be the biggest beneficiary of green hydrogen. I think that will really catch up on North will be able to catch up on many of the other provinces. So is the East with development of Trincomalee and the tourism. The other one will be the NCP, again with its potential for modernized agriculture. As far as insurance was concerned, it was transparent and we sold it. Now we took it back. If you ask the chairman insurance, the company could have got far more in insurance. Now I think you have lost Ronald, you have lost your lead in some of the sectors. So, okay, we've got to decide at the end of the day, are we going ahead or not? There was no fraud. It was a question of valuation. This will come again in this instance. So we've got to either make up our mind. Are we going to privatize or not? That's what we have to do. If the courts want to interfere, then the courts must find the money. That's all I can say.
I will come on to the questions, sir, on SOE. Just as you say, privatization is necessary. I think it is the process that is in question. The process and the transparency, accountability and transparency in that process, that is the matter in issue here. Honorable Iran Wickramaratne, would you like to comment specifically on the tax matter before we move on to the matter of government expenditure and SOEs?
I won't want to specifically comment on the tax matter, I must say that. And the reason is, this is IMF and beyond. And in the President's speech, he said, rather than looking at all the little details, I think being a preliminary discussion, it's better to talk about the big issues. I have been critical on details, not on the principle, even on tax. Because, and the reason for that is, economics and finance cannot be looked independent of the socio-political reality. This is a country which has had violence every 25-30 years, and there have been cycles, and therefore we need to have a buy-in, so with protection of the poor and taxation. So I won't get into the details of that. But the government has taken progressive measures, independence of the central bank, the law has come into parliament, and I would say that, of course, it should go back to more like the 2019 draft of it, and amendments should be moved in parliament. Uninterrupted fuel and energy, Kanchana minister has been doing things. Later in the media that Ruwan Wijewardena has been having discussions, post-COP27 I presume, sustainable energy, absolute must, foreign investment, absolute must. Some people are trying to thwart it because the cost cannot be brought down in any other way, and we want to see that happen. SOE reforms just referred to, transparency, absolute must, regulation has to be strengthened. These are the two basically pillars for SOEs. I won't get into the details of that either. Education, select committee in parliament, trying to build a consensus among parliamentarians. The system must be opened. This nonsense of keeping a closed system won't work. 28 foreign students in all Sri Lankan universities registered in 2022. Malaysia had 50,000. So let's all get together. This has to be absolutely changed. And then I would say there has been an office set up for overseas Sri Lankans. It's a welcome move. Overseas Sri Lankans are the biggest asset this country has. Education, investment, skills, and we have to actually bring them back here. And this is something we all can actually get together, and that office has been set up. I think we need to look at it. I would like to just make 3 quick suggestions, because I listened carefully to Sherrod. The issue for government is building confidence. Confidence is a major issue. The rest of it, we should leave it to the private sector and to the community rather than the government trying to say what to do and so forth. In that, I would say one of the suggestions is going beyond tax is really looking at a unified fiscal authority. So you have customs, excise, inland revenue all coming. Some things you have to do in 6 months, as the officials have been showing, some in 2 years, some will take 5 years, but we have to start now. And that will help in many ways. One is the number of taxpayers, the net will increase, revenue will increase. I'm not going into the details that the secretary referred to. And also corruption will reduce, because your interaction with the customs and so forth and so on will come down, because they take care of clearing, unified authority gets the revenue. Case studies are there of other countries, how they have got that. I would say we need to think, because this said IMF and beyond, I'm not thinking of the IMF program, I'm thinking way beyond that and saying this something needs to be done. The second thing I would say is public sector reform. In the last period with the IMF, we did fiscal consolidation based on revenue. I'm saying we have to look at cost as well. I'm looking at public confidence. The public are saying we are paying taxes, what's happening with our taxes, see all the inefficiencies, the service levels we get, etc., etc. We need to look at that. Therefore, there are things that we don't discuss even in this round with the IMF. I don't know what the internal discussions were, but the expenditure side, defense expenditures, one of the highest in Asia, nearly 10%. India is 9%. All of the Asian countries are less than 5%. We have to absolutely look at public sector reform on the expenditure side. And finally, I would say this. Again, I'm talking about public confidence. Right? People are concerned, investors locally and overseas, businessmen are concerned about the levels of corruption in this country. It's basically at every level corruption is there. And therefore we need to deal with it. And I am saying up front, there is a conflict of interest here. You're a minister, you're advised by the Attorney General's department. You robbed, they have to prosecute you. Cases have been put, cases have been withdrawn. And there are decades of experience in this. And therefore, we need to be radical, like countries like Hong Kong. And we need to look at not just bringing the law, because I know the President, Mr. Vijayadas Rajapaksa, have agreed to bring in the law. Laws have been drafted. But we need an independent public prosecutor who will actually go after this. And the reason I'm putting these suggestions, I'm looking beyond the IMF agreement. We need to build long-term confidence so that this country's direction will not be reversed.
Can I
Yes.
say a few words? I've enjoyed being here, but I've got to now attend another function. But this is called the dialogue. So I think that the dialogue begins. I think officials, I must say in fairness to them, have explained how the system is working. And we have opened it out, the IMF program, for discussions with everyone. And certainly when we are revising it once every 6 months, there's more space for discussion. But we'd like everyone to be involved in the growth strategy, which will be presented thereafter. So I will leave it to the compeer to ensure that there is certainly there's a dialogue going on, and I'd entrust Foreign Minister Ali Sabri to lead the government side. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency.